back to the channel, and today we're doing another true crime video. I don't know if this channel is gonna be a true crime channel just yet, but I got some cases I want to cover and I don't know what I'm doing with this channel anyway, so I'm just doing whatever I want. And this case we are gonna talk about today is known in Finland as Ulvilan surma, and if you weren't in Finland when this happened, I can't even begin to explain to you how big this was. This case was everywhere for years. This case is unsolved. There is one very strong suspect that the police has been focusing on. Jukka Lahti was a social psychologist who in 2006 was working for a copper factory. He had gotten his degree in social psychology as an adult and it was something he was really proud of. Jukka was married to a woman named Anneli Auer and together the two had 4 children. Jukka and Anneli met in 1996 during a course where Jukka was an instructor and Anneli was a guest. Anneli quickly fell in love with Jukka's charismatic and lively personality. However, at the time both of them were in relationship and Jukka was married. So even though the beginning of the relationship was quite rocky, soon Anneli got pregnant with their first child and the couple started living their life together as a family in 1998. So as I said, in 2006 Jukka was working as a human resources development manager for a copper factory and his work was really important to him. He really wanted to make being fired easier for the employee. But it soon turned out that he wasn't gonna be able to do that, as his job included much more firing and he simply didn't have the resources, and Jukka took this quite hardly. He was someone who wanted to make the world a better place in his field, and it was hard for him when he couldn't do that. As mentioned, he was someone who was charismatic and some people really liked him for that, others didn't. He seemed to be really outgoing, lively person. On December 1st, 2006 at 2:43 am, Finnish PSAP received a phone call from Tähtisentie 54 Ulvila that started with the words "Tulkaa nopeasti, täällä on joku tappaja", which translates to "Come quickly, there is a killer here". The caller was Jukka's wife Anneli, who told the police that an unknown attacker had stopped Jukka and also hit Anneli with a knife as well. 2 of couple's children had woken up during the attack. The phone call lasted for 4 minutes and Anneli was absent for 59 seconds, during which she gave the phone to their oldest child, Amanda. When the police arrived, they found Jukka Lahti lying next to the bed. The paramedics discovered that there was nothing they could do for the victim. What exactly happened according to Anneli Auer? She told the police that Jukka came home from work at around 11 p.m. that night and the couple went to bed at around midnight. At around 2:40 they woke up to this kind of splashing noise and noticed that there was a stranger breaking their patio door that led to their bedroom. This stranger was dressed in all black, wore a ski mask and was around 180 cm tall. The attacker jumped in from the broken window after smashing it broken for a good minute and attacked Jukka. Jukka grabbed 2 pieces of firewood and tried to defend himself with them. During the struggle, Anneli tried to help her husband, but the attacker hit her to the chest with a knife. This was the moment Anneli says she realized that this was a killer and so she decided to escape. Anneli ran to the front door and yelled for her kids, but the kids didn't come. After this, Anneli decided to call 112. She tried to go back and help her husband twice, but the intruder tried to attack her both times. That was the 59 seconds when she was absent from the phone and gave it to the 7-year-old Amanda. Amanda claims to have seen a tall man dressed in all black and Jukka Lahti lying dead on the floor. As mentioned, when the police arrived, Jukka Lahti was already dead. The police found shards of glass, a bloody knife and 2 bloody pieces of firewood in the room with him. 1 piece of firewood was on the floor next to Jukka and another one was on the bed, where the police also found a pimple glove. There were bloody footprints on the floor of the bedroom and out on the patio. The police also discovered bloody handprints made with pimple gloves on the patio door frame. There was also a good amount of brownish synthetic fiber found all around the crime scene. Police could never find out where this fiber came from. The crime scene investigator was certain that the door had been broken from the outside. And you need to put a pin on that because we're gonna go back to the patio door later on. And now we're gonna talk about every single way the police fucked up the beginning of the investigation. The amount of mistakes is unbelievable here. First of all, the crime scene wasn't even sealed properly and it wasn't sealed for long enough time, and they even let Anneli get some clothes and ice cream and whatever from the house when the crime scene was sealed. And they also let some police that had nothing to do with the case to just visit the house. They also never investigated the whole house properly. They only did the proper investigating on the bedroom and the patio. The footprints were not properly preserved, leading to some of them just being destroyed. So anyway, the autopsy revealed that Jukka Lahti did not die from stabbing. Before his death, he had been hit in the face and to his head with a heavy blunt object, and that's what killed him. This object was not found in the crime scene, and to this day it has never been found. The first director of investigation was Criminal Commissioner Juha Joutsenlampi. And keep that in mind because the director of investigation changes like 5 million times in this case. The police started investigating this case as a murder, and they suspected that the motive was revenge that had something to do with Jukka's job, as he worked for a copper factory that had just fired 400 people. Before the murder, Jukka had received threats, but there is not much known about those, and I don't know if police really looked into them. The police also profiled the attacker as psychopathic. Police asked the public for any sightings of a red Volvo that had been seen around the area on the night of the murder and the week before. The police also let the public know that they had caught the voice of the attacker on the PSAP call, and they also found DNA of the attacker on a piece of the firewood that was on the bed. This led to over 700 DNA samples being taken, but none of them was a match. In 2008, Pauli Kuusiranta took over the case as director of the investigation. It was around this time in 2009 when the police started suspecting the victim's wife, Anneli. And this is the part where this case gets actually insane. According to Anneli, it took her a year before she was able to start dating again. And in the April of 2009, she met a man named Seppo Mäkelä. The two hit it off and started seeing each other. Seppo visited Anneli's home. They even went on trips together. Seppo even got to know Anneli's children. Now are you wondering what exactly is insane about that? Well, Seppo was not Seppo at all. Seppo was a cop. Seppo was an alias for a cop who was working in a covert operation. He dated Anneli for over 6 months, trying to find evidence of her involvement in the murder of Jukka Lahti. When he wasn't able to find anything, Seppo wrote a report trashing and degrading Anneli every single way he could, starting from the way she walked. Anneli found out that Seppo was a cop accidentally in court. After this, Anneli demanded to see everything police had found out, but the police refused, claiming that they found nothing at all, which, yeah, they didn't. Anneli didn't get the report until Supreme Court ruled that police would have to give it to her. The defense claimed that the fact that police didn't find anything is a defense on itself, but there's also the fact that Seppo trashed Anneli in like every single way he could, as I said, like literally from the way she walks. But there was one single expectation. In his report, Seppo wrote that Anneli was a good mother to her children. And this is another thing I need you to put a pin on, because we are gonna come back to it later. Another thing that the police has been criticized for, but that I forgot to mention in my script, that during the investigation they used listening devices to listen the house of Anneli and her children. However, in September 28, 2009, Anneli Auer was arrested for the murder of her husband Jukka Lahti. 2 days later, Kuusiranta announced that Anneli had confessed to this murder. According to Anneli, this so-called confession had been something more like speculation. She claimed to have been really exhausted after a long day of questionings, and she just said something along the lines of, fine, I guess it's me then, if that's the only option. And the police took that as a confession. Meanwhile, Anneli didn't understand why the police was suspecting her, because she was on the phone when the murder took place. On the recording of the PSAP call, you can hear wailing of Jukka Lahti as well as the voice of the attacker, and if Anneli Auer was the murderer, she would have had to stage this noise. According to the police, on the recording you can hear Anneli say a 2-syllable word, uole, which is really close to the Finnish kuole, and that translates to die. Okay, so I listened to the recording and I'm not gonna play it here because it's really distressing. However, on this recording Anneli sounds really panicked and really distressed, and I personally didn't hear kuole on the recording. It could have been any noise like her breathing or something she said to her oldest child while she gave the phone to her. So in 2010, Anneli went in trial for the first time for manslaughter. According to the prosecutor, there had been no attacker that night, and Anneli and Jukka had vastly different values and they fought a lot and were considering a divorce. At the end of this particular fight, the couple had been throwing objects at each other as well as hitting each other with firewood and knives. According to this version of events, Jukka had grabbed a knife and stabbed Anneli to the side with it, after which Anneli had gotten hold of the knife and stabbed Jukka, who had fainted. Anneli thought she had killed him. According to the prosecutor, this was when Anneli started framing the murder. She broke the patio door and made bloody footprints all over the house as well as called 112. When she made the call, Jukka woke up and started wailing, and that's when she gave the phone to her oldest child, went back to Jukka and hit him with something blunt and heavy, killing him. The prosecutor argued that the child only imagined seeing an intruder leaving the house. Anneli was sentenced to a life in prison for the murder of her husband. But she made an appeal to the Court of Appeal of Vaasa and she was released. Defending her innocence were the footprints as well as the fact that both Anneli and Amanda claimed to have seen an intruder. Also, there's the fact that the actual murder weapon was not found at the crime scene, and the synthetic fiber they found at the scene didn't match the shirt Anneli was wearing that night. The jury also found it extremely unlikely that Anneli would have had time to frame everything to make it look like the murder had been committed by a third party. I'll add that the police dogs didn't find connection between Anneli and the knife used in the attack. In 2010, Pauli Kuuseranta retired and the director of investigation changed again, and this time the case was handed over to Erik Salonsaari. In the August of 2011, Anneli's brother, who had been the surrogate parent for the children, contacted the police and claimed he had proof of Anneli's involvement. The children had new claims of the night of the murder and he had videotaped these confessions. The brother also claimed that Anneli was a Satanist and practiced rituals that included killing dozens of animals. According to the second oldest child, who was 4 years old at the time of the murder, Anneli had practiced killing her husband, and for the actual murder she had built a wooden armor that had prevented any blood splashing on her. The second oldest child claimed to have heard everything through a wall to the children's room. The child claimed to have heard someone picking up a knife and pressing the buttons of a tape recorder. So, according to the child, the actual murder was committed before the 112 call and the wailing came from a tape. The sound researcher of the police agrees that the murder was committed before the call to the PSAP and that during the time of the call, Jukka was already dead. Amanda, who was 7 years old at the time of the murder, denies the stories of her younger siblings and claims to have seen the intruder. According to the prosecutor, the children knew that Anneli was planning to kill Jukka in 2006 and she had been acting violent towards him. If this is all true, it is really hard to imagine the children trusted their mother. However, in 2009, Seppo didn't notice any concerning symptoms or really anything weird in the children. The children seem to have a good, trusting relationship with their mother. In 2012, FBI stepped in and tried to find any evidence of manipulation on the recording, such as pre-recorded parts, etc. However, the FBI was unable to find anything that would indicate that the call was fabricated. In August 20, 2013, this case went on trial yet again. In their appeal, the prosecution claimed that Jukka's blood and ashes had been used for some sort of satanistic rituals, but in the beginning of the trial, they quickly dropped this claim. During this trial, the prosecution and the defense also argued about whether or not the stories of the younger siblings should even be taken into account, because when this murder happened, the younger siblings were 1 and 4 years old. However, on December 12, 2013, Anneli Auer was sentenced for life in prison yet again. Most of the jury didn't believe that there was an attacker in the house, and while they didn't believe that the murder was planned, they thought that it was incredibly cruel. The jury ended up not taking the children's version into account. Also, another fun thing happened in 2013. Remember the DNA they discovered on the firewood? For years the police thought this DNA belonged to the attacker, but in 2013 they noticed that it in fact belonged to a police officer who was investigating the crime scene. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the crime scene was not sealed very well, and even police who had literally nothing to do with the case visited the crime scene. Oh, I remember the patio door that had been broken from the outside. The prosecutor really kept changing their story on like from where this patio door had been broken. It was like in some trials it was from the outside, then it was from the inside, then outside, then inside. To the point it's like pretty much an urban legend in Finland that this patio door was broken from the inside when it was literally broken from the outside. Now we have to go back to 2011 to look at Anneli Auer's other charges. 2011, Anneli and her ex-boyfriend Jens Kukka were charged with sexual assault of 7 minors. 4 of the victims were siblings and 3 of the children were not related. The assaults happened between 2004 and 2010 when the victims were aged from 3 to 10. I will not go into the details of this case, but basically the younger children were forced to watch Anneli and Jens Kukka have group sex with the oldest child, who at the time was 10 years old, and sometimes they were forced to join in. Anneli was also accused of being extremely violent with these kids and performing satanistic rituals with them that included killing dozens of parrots, mice and cats. Even though jury deemed most of these claims impossible, Anneli and Jukka were sentenced to 10 years in prison. Even though one doctor found scars that fit the claims of violence, the prosecution ignored 2 other examinations in 2009 and 2010 where any scars were not found. This places the time frame of these scars being made to a much later time when Anneli would have been sitting in prison for the murder of her ex-husband. So back to 2013, Anneli made an appeal about her sentence, and on February 19, 2015 the Court of Appeal of Vaasa dismissed the murder charge. According to the Court of Appeals, the investigation was lacking as there were several signs that showed that there could have been an intruder. However, Anneli stayed in prison as she had been convicted with the mentioned sexual assault of a minor. She was released on parole on June 2015. So that's pretty much the end of this dumpster fire. Now we can talk about where are these people now. In 2016, Anneli Auer released a book titled Murhalesken muistelmat, which kinda loosely translates to the memoirs of the murder widow. She has mostly disappeared from the public eye now, though she is still running a blog. And according to the blog, the sexual assault conviction is going to be rescinded. I only saw that on the blog and I really didn't look further into that, so I don't know how true that is. The oldest child, Amanda, gave an interview to a German magazine in 2016. The magazine made an article about this case and interviewed both Amanda and Anneli. Amanda talked about her trauma and how this experience has torn her family apart. Parts I read were simply heartbreaking. In the interview, Amanda mentioned that her younger siblings still live with his uncle and they don't want to have anything to do with Amanda or their mother. Amanda has tried writing a letter to her siblings. According to her, when social workers started reading this letter to them, they didn't want to hear it. Meanwhile, Anneli is completely forbidden from seeing her younger children. Apparently, she does hear about them through a social worker, but the children have told the social worker not to tell Anneli anything about their personal lives or hobbies. This was another thing that I forgot to mention in this already really long video, but I think this is important when discussing this case. Media really fucking hated Anneli Auer for years. Public very much still deems her guilty for this. In Finland, she's very much someone who got away with it. I don't think my opinion here, I don't think it matters. Personally, I don't see anything that would prove that Anneli Auer killed her husband. After she was released in 2015, this case went cold, and after the farce that this case has been since 2009, it's very unlikely that police will ever reopen the investigation. If Anneli Auer didn't kill her husband, that means that the actual killer who committed a very brutal murder just walked out of the crime scene and was never caught. So I think that was it for today. As I said, this case has been absolutely insane to look into, and I can't even begin to explain how huge this case was in Finland for years. It was interesting to have a little deeper look into this as well. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we see you again in another video. Bye.